Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Gopi Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavalabha Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dari Gopi Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Sata Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrind Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sekaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai Shishi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda, Hari Hari Bolo. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga and His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yeah. So we're having the wonderful opportunity to celebrate the appearance of Lord Varaha. So I'm going to read that pastime and make some comments as I go through. It's super exciting because I was just thinking, we've been reading in the 10th canto. What's really amazing is that the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered to be the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in book incarnation, and the first canto is his feet, and the 10th canto is his face. So any part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's body is transcendental and pure and enlivening for the devotee. And so you'll notice, I guess I've noticed this with my spiritual master, that he loves all the stories from the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Ramayana and all these different stories and pastimes about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I was thinking, we're so fortunate to be able to hear about this. And that's like what it's like to really, be a pure devotee and on that level of love of God is that no matter what you're discussing about the Supreme Personality, you're enlivened by that. So we'll begin with this is the third canto, and it's chapter 13. We'll go back. The appearance of Lord Varaha. So, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, O king, after hearing all these most virtuous topics from the sage Maitreya, Vidura inquired further on the topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which he adored to hear. And so we're going to be going through these verses. It's going to hopefully make it through the whole chapter. It's not extremely long. I'm going to read the translations. But one of the things that really stood out for me was here we're hearing that Maitreya is speaking to Vidura, and Vidura, is adoring to hear these pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it reminded me very much about Parikshit Maharaj inquiring from Shukadev Goswami and his enthusiasm to hear that this is really a requirement when we're approaching and learning in this process of bhakti to have a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is how we hear is so important. And all these verses you'll see, especially leading up to the appearance of Lord Varaha, are really significant in this regard and in our attitude and how we create the right consciousness for developing this relationship with the Lord, right? So Vidura said, O great sage, what did Swayambhuv Man, the dear son of Brahma, do after obtaining his very loving wife? O best of the virtuous, the original king of kings, Manu, was a great devotee of the personality of Godhead, Hari, and thus it is worth hearing of his sublime character and activities. Please describe them. I am very eager to hear. And here is that example of how great the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that even these great personalities want to hear about the devotees of the Lord and their relationship with the Lord. And that's how we're working through this process of devotional service, of bhakti, of hearing and being the servant of the servant of the servant, and then how the servant, the pure servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is non-different than him because of all of his qualities. So even hearing about him is enlivening, right? So appreciating the qualities of the pure devotees and those that have dedicated their lives to preaching this Krishna consciousness and serving the Supreme Personality and their spiritual master Prabhupada. Persons who hear from the spiritual master with great labor and for a long time must hear from the mouths of pure devotees about the character and activities of the pure devotees. Pure devotees always think within their hearts of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead who awards his devotees liberation. So again, here celebrating the devotee of the devotee of the devotee, and those that even the activities and the characters of the pure devotees are worth hearing about because of their relationship to Krishna, right? Sri Shukadev Goswami said, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, was pleased to place his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura because Vidura was very meek and humble. The sage Maitreya was very pleased with Vidura's words, and being influenced by his spirit, he attempted to speak. So again, here's another quality that's given to us in opening our heart and our consciousness, adjusting, giving our consciousness the right consciousness of what it means to want to hear about the Supreme Personality Godhead, and how we can actually hear and develop that relationship is being very meek and gentle and very humble, right? That's required for the ears to be able to hear about these pastimes and actually absorb them in our heart and participate in them eventually, is having this humility. That's the door that actually opens the ears to being able to hear, not just listen, but actually hear and take it into the heart. The sage Maitreya said to Vidura, after his appearance, Manu, the father of mankind, along with his wife, thus addressed the reservoir of Vedic wisdom, Brahma, with obeisances and folded hands. So again, showing us the etiquette. You are the father of all living entities and the source of their substance, because they are all born of you. Please order us how we may be able to render service unto you. And again, here's another step in this process of devotional service, is to ask the spiritual master. And Prabhupada said this, and I remember this very specifically, of, just ask how it is that I may serve, right? That's the attitude. How may I serve you is what we should be asking in this process, right? From the spiritual master. Very important. Not, in other words, like that's the other thing that came to mind as I was preparing for class is, we want to ask, how may I serve? Because then we're learning from the spiritual master how to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and what pleases him. By asking how we may serve and how we can please the spiritual master is giving us the education on how we can actually learn to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's following that disciplic succession and realizing, our position with humility and inquiring how it is that we may serve. O worshipful one, please give us your direction for the execution of duty within our working capacity so that we can follow it for fame and in this life and progress in the next. So how we progress in devotional service is how we approach the spiritual master. Lord Brahma said, my dear son, O Lord of the world, I am very pleased with you, and I desire all blessings for you and your wife. You have without reservation surrendered yourself unto me with your heart for my instructions. So again, echoing that receiving the blessings and pleasing the spiritual master is surrendering ourselves and hearing in our heart the instructions of the spiritual master. So important. O hero, your example is quite befitting a son in relationship with his father. This sort of adoration for the superior is required. One who is beyond the limit of envy and who is sane accepts the order of his father with great delight and executes it to his full capacity. And we can also, interject that, your example as a disciple in relationship with your spiritual master or your spiritual father is correct, and that this adoration of the superior is actually required for that loving exchange that's going to happen between you and the spiritual master, and that with that you get enlivened to execute all his instructions. Since you are my very obedient son, I ask you to beget children qualified like yourself in the womb of your wife. Rule the world in pursuance of the principles of devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus worship the Lord by performances of yagya. O king, if you can give proper protection to the living beings in the material world, that will be the best service for me. When the Supreme Lord sees you to be a good protector of conditioned souls, certainly the master of senses will be very pleased with you. So again, like slowly, piece by piece, adding to and opening up this relationship of the disciple and the spiritual master, of, the devotee and Krishna, and, being able to, because obviously when we're in that position of hearing from the spiritual master, learning what pleases Krishna, what pleases him the most, what pleases him the most is the protection of the living beings. And what is going to protect the living of the living beings is their relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So sharing this, um, relationship with the spiritual master, which he mentioned, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is given in that previous verse, is, he gives the instructions: beget children, rule the world in pursuance of the principles of devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's what's going to please me. That's what's going to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is giving protection to the conditioned souls, because obviously they're suffering, because they don't know or don't have this relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore they don't even know how the material world works and why they're in all the different challenging and painful and, you know, difficult situations that they're coming up against, right? They don't even understand life and karma, and why good things happen to bad people or bad things happen to good people. They don't really see all the underlying layers. They think themselves to be the controllers and all these things. So giving protection by sharing Krishna consciousness and hearing about the pastimes of the Lord is what will please the Lord the most, and the spiritual master as well. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janardana, Lord Krishna, is the form to accept all the results of sacrifice. If he is not satisfied, then one's labor for advancement is futile. He is the ultimate self, and therefore one who does not satisfy him certainly neglects his own interests, which is obviously self-explanatory. But, again, for me, as I was reading through this, all these verses of really talking about the essence of Krishna consciousness, right? The essence of hearing from the spiritual master, having a relationship, accepting joyfully the instructions and learning to follow those because that's what's going to please him and ultimately Krishna, caring for the living entities, knowing that that's the ultimate for that compassion for living entities is what's going to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then Sri Manu said, O all-powerful Lord, O killer of all sins, I shall abide by your order. Now please let me know my place and that of the living entities born of me. So again, this humility of being willing to hear from the disciple, from your superior, and asking, what's my place? Where do I belong? And that of the living entities. And this reminded me too of like in developing this humility and of being able to hear and these pastimes and develop a relationship as considering what my place is with humility, right? And so many times, like this story of Tamal Krishna and Srila Prabhupada sharing about, because I guess Tamal Krishna had got a little bit heady, right? And Srila Prabhupada said, there's this big universe, and in this big universe, there's this, the whole planetary system. And in this whole planetary system, there's this Earth planet. And on this Earth planet, there's so many countries and oceans and, massive land masses. And, in these land masses, there's this one continent. And in this one continent, there's this one state. And in this one state, there's this one city. And in this one city, there's this one little house. And in this one little house, there's this one little Tamal Krishna, right? But what this reminded me of too is like, I've meditated on that, like how try to figure out how small I am, but still consider myself valuable, and of some value in what I contribute as far as my relationship with Krishna. And as I'm walking around the property, I mean, you can walk through the woods, you can look in the yards, and especially as it's winter and fall, and you can just see hundreds and thousands of leaves, right? So you walk through, just imagine walking through the forest and seeing all these leaves. Which one of those leaves is significant? Which one of them is significant? There's so many hundreds of millions of leaves. Which one stands out? Which one's important, right? And I thought, that's what I am. That's what we are. That's how insignificant we're, just like a leaf in the wood, right? Because there's so many millions upon billions upon trillions, quadrillions of living entities, and where's our significance? Our significance obviously is that we are in a physical human body that allows us the opportunity, the unique and only opportunity to have a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Our significance is we're part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because of that, we have his qualities in minute quantities, right? But understanding with humility that every single leaf matters to Krishna. There's not one single atom, not one single cell, not one living entity that doesn't matter. All those leaves, so that, when we realize that all living entities are connected, then, we realize with humility, and it's with that level of humility that we can actually open our ears and hear and start to develop our relationship with Krishna, which it talks about in a couple of verses back, where you have to have this disciple is beyond the limit of envy and who is sane, accepts. So we have to get rid of that envy in order to have this relationship, right? And know what our place is. O Master of the demigods, please attempt to lift the earth, which is merged in the great water, because it is the dwelling place for all living entities. It can be done by your endeavor and by the mercy of the Lord. Sri Maitreya said, thus, seeing the earth merged in the water, Brahma gave his attention for a long time to how it could be lifted. Brahma thought, while I have been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? And his answer, it is best to let the Almighty Lord direct us. So here, again, is hearing from the spiritual master, hearing from the Lord, hearing from the spiritual master who's non-different than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and taking that direction from him, because he's going to resolve. He's the controller. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the controller. He's the one who we get all our knowledge from, right? And so obviously when Lord Brahma is meditating, he comes to that conclusion. The Lord of all Lords, the cause of all causes, the controller, he's the one who can give us the solution, right? O sinless Vidura, all of the sudden, while Brahma was engaged in thinking, a small form of a boar came out of his nostril. The measurement of the creature was not more than the upper portion of his thumb. And so again, like the personality of Godhead. And to me, what this said was, obviously you've got the Supreme Personality of Godhead coming out in the form of a boar, no bigger than the tip of his thumb, out of the nostril of Brahma is like just beyond any comprehension. But it made me think Lord Brahma certainly was a pure devotee, because otherwise the Supreme Personality of Godhead wouldn't have appeared from his body in such a way, right? O descendant of Bharata, while Brahma was observing him, that boar became situated in the sky in a wonderful manifestation, as gigantic as an elephant. And if you remember the story of Matsya and Satyavrata, is that the Lord appeared in the form of a fish, and he was in a very small vessel, but then he continued to grow and grow and grow and become this gigantic fish that actually they tied a boat and saved the Vedas in, right? So here again, we have the same thing where we just can't even imagine the Supreme Personality of Godhead coming out as teeny as the tip of the thumb, and then he just grows into this big, gigantic form, right? Struck with wonder at observing the wonderful boar-like form in the sky, Brahma, with great brahmanas like Marichi, as well as the Kumars and Manu, began to debate in various ways. Is this some extraordinary entity come in the pretense of a boar? It is very wonderful that he has come from my nose. Can you imagine having this conversation? First of all, this boar was seen no bigger than the tip of a thumb, and within a moment he was as large as a stone. My mind is perturbed. Is he the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu? While Brahma was deliberating with his sons, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu roared tumultuously like a great mountain. And this just, I don't know, because can you imagine the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He's in this huge form, I mean, just massive, and as he bellows out loudly, I mean, we feel the train coming by, right? And it creates this normal, and it's pretty loud, especially when there's rain. You can hear it more because of the cover. It echoes against that, and so it's a lot louder and more. But just thinking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this form of the boar, and how that must have reached out over all the universes, and then thinking, like, what the thought came to mind was, this is transcendental sound, and as that's hitting you, it's non-different than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and how that must have affected these great personalities to be there, right? And actually being touched by the vibration of the voice of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead enlivened Brahma and the other highly elevated Brahmanas by again roaring with his uncommon voice, which echoed in all directions. And then this reminded me of them blowing the conch shells on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. When Krishna and Arjuna blew their conch shells, he had to, pacify Duryodhana because of the effect of those conch shells. That's transcendental sound, right? It's not mundane sound. And so that's enlivening for them. And so he does it again to enliven them again and get them excited that he's there, right? When the great sages and thinkers who are residents of Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka heard the tumultuous voice of Lord Boar, which was the all-auspicious sound of the all-merciful Lord, they chanted auspicious chants from the three Vedas. Playing like an elephant, he entered into the water after roaring again and replied to the Vedic prayers by the great devotees. The Lord is the object of the Vedic prayers, and thus he understood that the devotees' prayers were meant for him. So even this roaring is this, like, relationship between him and the devotees. Like, he's having this great dialogue with them and reciprocating this reciprocating process when he's roaring, and they're praying and he's roaring, and they're having this beautiful interchange on a very spiritual level, right? Before entering the water to rescue the earth, Lord Boar flew in the sky, slashing his tail, his hard hairs quivering. His very glance was luminous, and he scattered the clouds in the sky with his hooves and his glittering white tusks. So imagine this, just imagine. This is not an ordinary boar that you're seeing on, on some island or in some, wild area, and he's all mud covered and he probably smells bad. But this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's got his tail slashing, and then his hairs are quivering. So each of his hairs is like transcendental and probably vibrant, right? And his very glance is luminous, and he scattered the clouds with his movement, right? We have big planes that go through the clouds, but they don't do anything. But, Supreme Personality of Godhead goes up and he scatters all the clouds, and then with his hooves, and then has these glittering white tusks. So just imagine his form and how inspiring and amazing that must be. He was personally the Supreme Lord Vishnu and was therefore transcendental. Yet, because he had the body of a hog, he searched after the earth by smell. His tusks were fearful, and he glanced over the devotee brahmanas engaged in offering prayers. Thus he entered the water. And so here again, we're emphasizing, or it's being emphasized, that he's transcendental, that he's not a normal hog. But what's interesting is that he searched after the earth by smell, and this reminded me of how every part of the Lord is interchangeable, right? Because he can eat with his ears, he can eat with his hands, he can eat with his eyes, and so certainly he can smell with his nose in the form of a boar. But this is his desire for pastime, right? And to be enlivened by his spiritual senses in this way, not normal like what we would do, right? Diving into the water like a giant mountain, Lord Boar divided the middle of the ocean, and two big waves appeared as the arms of the ocean, which cried loudly as if praying to the Lord, O Lord of all sacrifices, please do not cut me in two. Kindly give me protection. I mean, just imagine going into the going into the ocean, and how massive it must have been and how huge those waves had been. But then even the waves have this personality of, throwing up their arms and offering prayers to the Lord. Lord Boar penetrated the water with his hooves, which were like sharp arrows, and found the limits of the ocean. Although it was unlimited, he saw the earth, the resting place for all living beings, lying as it was in the beginning of creation, and he personally lifted it. Lord Boar very easily took the earth on his tusks and got it out of the water. Thus he appeared very splendid. Then, his anger glowing like the Sudarshan wheel, he immediately killed the demon Hiranyaksha, although he tried to fight with the Lord. Thereupon Lord Boar killed the demon within the water, just as a lion kills an elephant. The cheeks and tongue of the Lord became smeared with the blood of the demon, just as an elephant becomes reddish from digging in the purple earth. Then the Lord, playing like an elephant, suspended the earth on the edge of his curved white tusks. He assumed a bluish complexion, like that of a tamal tree, like Krishna, and thus the sages, headed by Brahma, could understand him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and offered respectful obeisances unto him. And so this echoes this whole, chapter as we started out, and we've developed, or seen and started to develop an understanding of what it's like to be, or have a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that ultimately this attitude will divulge and reveal the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now all their doubts are gone. They understand him to be. So this is another reciprocation for their endeavor and their faith and their practice and their devotional service, is that he's revealed to them. All the sages uttered with great respect, O unconquerable enjoyer of all sacrifices, all glories and all victories unto you. You are moving in your form of the personified Vedas, and in the hair holes of your body, the oceans are submerged. For certain reasons, to uplift the earth, you have now assumed the form of a boar. So again, the hair holes of the Supreme Personality, I mean, imagine this, each one of the little hairs on his body is, there are oceans submerged. I want to read the purport too. The Lord can assume any form he likes, and in all circumstances he is the cause of all causes. Since his form is transcendental, he is always the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as he is the causal ocean in the form of Mahavishnu. Innumerable universes generate from the holes of his bodily hairs, and thus his transcendental body is the Vedas personified. He is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and he is the unconquerable Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is never to be misunderstood to be other than the Supreme Lord because of his assuming the form of a boar to lift the earth. That is clear. That is the clear understanding of the sages and great personalities like Brahma and other residents of the higher planetary systems. So again, just being, understanding that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his wonderful personalities, and not to misunderstand him as just some mundane human or animal, that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is his body is the personified Vedas, like I was speaking about earlier in the Bhagavatam, being the different parts of his body. We can be enthused by reading any of these pastimes about, you know, the Supreme Personality or any of his devotees, and, their lessons that they're learning and the lessons that they're sharing through their actions with us of developing this relationship. And then he's unconquerable. He's the unconquerable Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what that is for us is he is our safety. He's our shelter. He's our protector. He will always be there for us. He will always have our back because we have very specifically dedicated our lives to serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead by cooking for him, by cleaning for him, by making ghee wicks for him, by ironing the handkerchiefs, by dressing the deities, but repairing, things on the property. All these things that we are doing are preparing us for this relationship and developing our humility, and learning how to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is to learn to do everything for him, not for our own selfish purposes, right? Fulfilling our own needs, but for fulfilling his. And we do that by, um, dovetailing all the gifts that we have. O Lord, your form is worshipable by performances of sacrifice, but souls who are simply miscreants are unable to see it. All the Vedic hymns, Gayatri and others, are in the touch of your skin. So think about that if you're chanting the Gayatri, that it's present in the touch of the Supreme Personalities of Godhead, if you're being attentive, which is the core impetus for everything we do, is being attentive. Inattentiveness is the root cause of all the anarthas. Remember that. So all the Vedic hymns, in your bodily hairs is the kusha grass, which are used for sitting on for sacrifice. And in your eyes is the clarified butters. And in your 4 legs are the 4 kind of fruitive activities. O Lord, your tongue is the plate of sacrifice. Your nostril is another place of sacrifice. In your belly is the eating plate of sacrifice. And another plate of sacrifice is the holes of your ears. In your mouth is the Brahma plate of sacrifice. Your throat is the plate of sacrifice known as Soma. And whatever you chew is known as Agnihotra. Purport by Prabhupada. The Vedavadis say that there is nothing more than the Vedas and the performances of sacrifice mentioned in the Vedas. They have recently made a rule in their group to formally observe daily sacrifice. They simply ignite a small fire and offer something whimsically, but they do not strictly follow the sacrificial rules and regulations mentioned in the Vedas. It is understood that by regulation, there are different places or plates of sacrifice required, such as Shuk, Shruva, Varhis, Chaturhotra, Ida, Chamasa, Prashitra, Graha, Agnihotra. One cannot achieve the results of sacrifice unless one observes the strict regulations. In this age, there is practically no facility for performing sacrifices in strict discipline. Therefore, in this age of Kali, there is a stricture regarding such sacrifices. It is explicitly directed that one should perform Sankirtan Yagya and nothing more. The incarnation of the Supreme Lord is Yageshwara, and unless one has respect for the incarnation of the Lord, he cannot perfectly perform sacrifice. In other words, taking shelter of the Lord and rendering service unto him is the factual performance of all sacrifices, as explained herein. Different plates of sacrifice correspond to the different parts of the body of the Lord's incarnation. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, it is explicitly directed that one should perform Sankirtan Yagya to please the Lord's incarnation as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This should be rigidly followed in order to achieve the result of Yagya performance. I thought this was so significant of understanding that in this age of Kali, things are different. Like this perfection of Yagya and all these different sacrifices and performance of Vedic hymns are not to be done in this age of Kali. And then it made me think of Varnashram Dharma, because there's so much discussion around Varnashram Dharma and what that means and all these things, but we can't project that into Kali Yuga. And I thought, what real Varnashram Dharma is this engaging all our senses in serving the spiritual master and serving, the devotees, and bringing people to Krishna consciousness, that and dovetailing all of our, different qualities and gifts that have been given to us, that's really Vanashram in the age of Kali Yuga, is whatever gifts that Krishna has given us, whatever talents, and skill sets that we have, is using those yukta vairagya, using anything that we have, and the material energy, through our skills and our abilities to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's real Varnashram Dharma and Kali Yuga, because we can't just falsely project some structure that society's not really able to accept. They haven't even accepted the concepts and precepts of the Bhagavad Gita of you're not the body. So putting in a whole social structure really isn't going to be able to be done in Kali Yuga. The real structure, which is what this is talking about, the real performance and the real stricture regarding such sacrifices and performance of these sacrifices, is Sankirtan Yagya. That's the essence in this Kali Yuga, is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. That's what's really going to carry everybody on a huge wave back home, back to Godhead, is this, chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, and giving people the basics of Krishna consciousness, of understanding they're not the body, and then giving them the opportunity to take whatever they have and use it in Krishna's service. Prabhupada shared that often. Don't change anything, just what you're doing, whether you're working a job, whatever your skill sets are, just utilize that in Krishna consciousness and serving in devotional service, doing your service at the temple. It's like, I have so many years, like 45 years of working in the material world, and I can use those skills in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's going to make my spiritual master has said, that's going to make him happy. That's what's going to make Krishna happy. Whatever you have, dovetail it, yukta vairagya of this, that's real renunciation, is utilizing everything in Krishna's service. It's so important to remember that, and that will please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Moreover, O Lord, the repetition of your appearance is the desire for all kinds of initiation. Your neck is the place for the three desires, and your tusks are the result of initiation and the end of all desires. Your tongue is the prior activities of initiation. Your head is the fire without sacrifice, as well as the fire of worship. And your living forces are the aggregate of all desires. O Lord, your semen is the sacrifice called Soma Yagya. Your growth is the ritualistic performances of the morning. Your skin and touch sensations are the 7 elements of the Agnishtoma sacrifice. Your bodily joints are the symbols of various other sacrifices performed in 12 days. Therefore, you are the object of all sacrifices called Soma and Asoma, and are bound by yagyas only. So again, every part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is vital to our devotional life. O Lord, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are the worshipable by universal prayers, Vedic hymns, and sacrificial ingredients. We offer our obeisances unto you. You can be realized by the pure mind, freed from all visible and invisible material contamination. We offer our respectful obeisance unto you as the Supreme Spiritual Master of Knowledge in devotional service. So Prabhupada shares in the purport that the qualifications of bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord, is that the devotee should be free from all material contaminations and desires. This freedom is called vairagya, or renouncement of material desires. One who engages in devotional service to the Lord according to regular principles is automatically freed from material desires. And in that pure state of mind, one can realize the personality of Godhead. So again, this whole process of developing humility, understanding our place, understanding who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, hearing the instructions, following them to learn what pleases Him, this devotional service, this process of bhakti, this devotional service in our heart, just doing that, and then this freedom called vairagya, or material renouncement of material desires, is again yukta vairagya, is really what devotional service is about, is utilizing everything in Krishna's service. And that by doing that, when we engage that way in devotional service according to the regular principles, then automatically we receive a pure mind and freedom from the material desires, and have this relationship. So again, I didn't get to finish the last few verses, but basically of this wonderful form of the Lord bore, and then, just glorification of the Lord, because that's what happens when you get to that place of pure devotional service, is you always want to glorify the Lord, right? All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to the Association of the Devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Radha Golokananda, Ki Jai.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Enam Kanvanda Aravindalayatatam Bharavatam Samasitam Buddhasundaram Dandar Bhagom Vidamaniyam Vishesha Shobha. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Andani Asna Priya Priti Manti Vasyanti Vikayanti Viraganti Ananda Chimaya Sadhu Dara Vikasya. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. 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 Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Yasomati nandana brajabaro nagara gokulara jana kana Gopi parana dana madana manohara Kaliya damana vidana Amala harinama miya vilasha Amala harinama miya vilasha Vipina Purandara Navina Nagarabara Vamsi Varana Suvasa Vipina Purandara Navina Nagarabara Vamsi Varana Suvasa Braja Janapalana Surakula Nashana Nanda Godana Rokwala Govinda Manala Navanita Taskara Govinda Manala Navanita Taskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vatsana Harara Sarasika Kripa Moya Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vatsana Harara Sarasika Kripa Moya Sri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natapara Vrindavana Natapara Bhakati Vinoda Saya Bhakati Vinoda Saya Yasomatina Nana Brajaparo Nakara Gokulara Janagana Gopi Parana Dana Mana Manohara Vipina Punana Navila Nagara Para Govinda Manavana Sri Bhakati Vinoda Saya Bhakati Vinoda Saya Hare
His Divine Grace by Jadanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami. Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Shri Gangamai Ki Jai, Shri Jamunamai Ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Lord Krishna is beloved son of Jashoda, transcendental lover in the land of Braja, the delight of Gokula, known by the nickname Kana, the wealth of the lives of the gopis, the attractor of Cupid, and the punisher of serpent Kalia. These pure holy names of Lord Hari are full of sweet nectarian pastimes. Lord of the 12 forests of Braj, ever youthful, the best of lovers, player of the flute, and excellent dresser, protector of the inhabitants of Braja, destroyer of demonic dynasties, keeper and tender of Nanda's cows, giver of pleasure to cows, land, and spiritual senses, husband of the goddess of fortune, butter thief, and beautiful little cowherd boy of Nanda Maharaj, wander of the Jamuna riverbank, leaf of the garments of the gopis, enjoyer of the mellows of the rasa dance, very merciful, lover and beloved of Sri Radha, the great dancer of Vrindavan, and the only shelter of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Cheto darpana marjanam bhava mahatavagni nirvapanam sriya kairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavadu jivanam Anandam Buddhivadnam Patipatam Varnam Swadanam Sarvatma Samanam
Namamagari Bahudani Jasava Sakti Tata Pritani Amita Smarani Nakala Etadrishita Vakripam Bhagavam Mamapi Dudaivam Idrishaim Hajanina Nuraga Nadapi Sunichana Darurapi Sahina Amani Namanadana Kirtanya Sadahari Sundari Kavitam Vashagadisha Kamaye Mamasha Manisha Manishvari Bhavata Bhakti Haitukitwai Ainanda Tanusha Kinkaram Pachitama Vishame Babambudo Kripaya Tavapada Pankaja Shtita Duli Sadri Samvichintaya Nayanangala Dehrupdaraya Vadanagar Garad Gayajura Pulakai Nichitam Vapukada Tavanamagrahan Bhavishati Jugaitam Nimishana Chakshusa Pravrisaitam Sunyaitam Sagasarvam Govinda Virahiname Arishyava Padaratam Pinashpimam Adarshanam Mahatan Karotuva the sickness extinguish the fire of additional life, repeated birth and death. This here the movement is a prime
benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it gives to fully taste the nectar for which we are always and anxious. Oh, my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. These transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh, Lord. My name. I'm so fortunate that I have no attraction for them. I will chant the only name of the Lord. Thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. A false sense of false prestige to others. In such a state of mind. Nor do I desire women and followers devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, and return in some or other. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me in one of the Oh, when will my voice choke up? Send in the recitation of your name. Oh, Govinda, feeling yourself like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. Or makes me brokenhearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything. He is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Jai.